My fork hung in the air, paused above a slice of turkey I still hadn't touched. Brandon's tone had that hard edge he uses when he wants to slice someone open in front of an audience and make them smile while they bleed. "Mom," he said, putting his wine glass down a little too loudly. "We've all been talking. You really don't need to go all out with these big dinners anymore. You're not exactly quick in the kitchen these days. How long did it take to get this bird done?" 3 hours, 4. The words sounded light on the surface, but the slow, practiced smirk that followed made my face heat. A ripple of laughter moved along the table, polite from a few, pleased from others. His wife wore that tight little smile she pulls on whenever he's cruel, and calling it a joke. His oldest boy snorted under his breath. Brandon kept going. "If you'd just admit you're not as capable as you used to be, we could all save ourselves the hassle. You could show up, sit in a corner, and pose for the pictures. We'd handle everything else." I made myself smile because that's what you do when your own son turns your embarrassment into dinnertime entertainment. The kind of smile that says, "I'll laugh now so I can cry later." My hands wanted to shove my chair back and leave the table, but I stayed put. I always stayed put. The room got quiet enough to hear a serving spoon tap the sweet potatoes. Some people stared at their plates. Others looked at me then away, like my cousin Ruth, whose eyes held something close to pity before she dropped them. 3 seats down, my granddaughter leaned toward her phone. I figured she was just scrolling, bored with the grown-ups talking, until I saw the cool blue light on her face and realized she wasn't scrolling at all. She was on a video call. She didn't speak to me, but she tipped the screen just enough for me to see Daniel's face, my ex-husband. He sat in his study, those same military plaques and medals behind him that he kept when we were married. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed. He had heard everything. My granddaughter's voice came out calm, almost too calm. "Dad," she said, cutting in as Brandon reached for another pour. "Grandpa's been listening the whole time. He heard every word you said to Grandma." Brandon stopped mid-pour, then laughed. "You're kidding," he said, shaking his head like this was all one big mix-up. But I watched his eyes flick to the phone again, and the laugh never made it to them. Daniel's voice came through steady and low, that quiet command he used with young recruits before he took them apart. "Stay where you are, Brandon. I'm on my way." Before we continue, leave a note telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to the Never Too Old channel. We're building a space for people who know our best chapters can start at any age. Now back to the story. By 8 in the morning, the oven had already warmed the house. Cinnamon rolls scented the hallway, winding around the slow roast ham that had been in since dawn. My knees had been grumbling from the minute I swung out of bed, but I wasn't about to let them stop me. Holiday meals don't cook themselves. I stood at the counter peeling potatoes, each turn of the peeler sending a dull ache through my wrist. Outside, frost laced the edges of the lawn. Inside, it was me, the quiet hum of the fridge, and the soft jazz from the little radio on the shelf. The peace didn't last. Brandon came through the back door without a good morning. He carried one of those oversized coffees from a boutique place where they scribble your name in loopy letters on the lid. He didn't take off his coat. You remembered the Pinot Noir, right? The good one, not the cheap bottle. I kept my eyes on the potato. Yes, it's on the counter. He glanced at the pies cooling by the window and made a face. "Store crusts." "Yes," I said, still not looking up. "You couldn't roll dough yourself." I put the peeler down and stretched my stiff fingers. My hands don't work like they used to, Brandon. It'll be fine. He shrugged like I'd fallen short on a small test, snatched a roll from the basket I'd set aside, and kept issuing instructions. Sarah's going to want the rolls warm, don't forget. He left the way he came, not waiting for an answer. A minute later, Lily's voice came from the doorway. He's in rare form today. She leaned on the frame, hair twisted into that messy bun she wears when she's helping me. She crossed the room and kissed my cheek. Need me? I couldn't help smiling. Set the table for me. Use the tall water glasses. Your grandpa always said the short ones feel stingy. That made her smile. You talked to him today. This morning, I said, he's 2 towns over. Told me to call if I needed more chairs. She gave me a long look, weighing her words. You know you don't have to just swallow it, right? I knew what she meant, but I turned back to the potatoes. That's how he is. She didn't argue, but the small sound of her phone unlocking cut the kitchen quiet. When people hear divorce, they imagine shouting and slam doors. That wasn't us. Daniel and I didn't end in fireworks. We faded out. He was the military through and through, married to the service long before he married me. Even when he was home there was distance. You can't compete with deployments and duty that eats birthdays and anniversaries like they're optional. By the time Brandon turned 10, I'd already spent years raising him mostly on my own. Daniel would come back with gifts from Germany or Japan, his suitcase smelling faintly of jet fuel and the starch of pressed uniforms, and Brandon's face would light up like a tree in December. Then Daniel would leave, and that light would go out. I was the one left to pick up the pieces. We didn't fight much about it because what is the point of fighting with orders? One day we sat across the kitchen table, my stack of bills on one side, his new assignment on the other, and we both knew we were done. We signed, hugged in the hallway, and promised to behave decently. We kept that promise. Daniel still called on birthdays and holidays. He stopped by when he could, mowed the lawn without being asked, fixed the upstairs faucet without a fuss, but he wasn't there for the small things. Science fairs, fevers at 2 in the morning. The hard talks about grades and girlfriends. Those were mine. Maybe that's where the crack began. Brandon admired his father, the crisp uniform, the command in his voice, the way people straightened when he entered a room. Somewhere along the line he decided I was the opposite. If Daniel was steel, I was softness. Softness, he decided, didn't count. It started small when he was a teenager. Eye rolls at advice, curfews shrug off, a laugh when I got upset. As he got older it sharpened. Sarcasm that cut deeper, jokes that weren't jokes, comments you learn to absorb because answering them just wears you down. Lily noticed. She always has been sharper than her age. I would catch her watching the way he talked to me and over me, her little jaw set. She loved her dad, but she could still see. The irony was Daniel never spoke to me like that. Brandon took the part of his father he idolized and left out the parts that made the man worthy of respect. For the house hummed with people. The front door kept opening and closing, letting in blasts of cold air and the smell of damp wool. Someone wedged the screen with a heavy boot, and I could hear shoes scrape the welcome mat as more guests came in. Brandon named himself host, the kind who thinks listing flaws is part of his charm. Careful with the gravy boat, Mom, he said as I came out of the kitchen holding it with both hands. Last year we had lumps we don't want to repeat. I swallowed the urge to say something polite and kept moving, setting it on the table. The dining room looked lovely. Lily had pulled out the good cloth I keep for special days, and she'd folded the napkins into little peaks like a restaurant. The tall water glasses caught the chandelier light. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, breezed in with sparkling water. Do you have any at room temp? Cold makes me bloated. She didn't say thank you when I handed it over. As I circled the table, Brandon shadowed me. Put the rolls out last so they stay warm, he said. And the mashed potatoes, did you get the lumps out this time? I kept moving. They're fine. Fine for you or fine for the guests, he said, with a small laugh like we shared some private joke. Out of the corner of my eye saw Lily's mouth tighten. She slipped her phone out, tilted it, tapped twice. I figured she was texting a friend, but later I'd learn those taps started the call to Daniel. Brandon kept up his patter as people took their seats. Mom's famous rolls, he announced, setting down the basket. Famous because they're the only thing she never burns. A couple of cousins chuckled without looking my way. I pushed my lips into a smile, but my stomach pinched. Years of small cuts had taught me to hide the bruise. Tonight, though, Lily's eyes found mine and held for half a second, and I saw something there. Not pity, not even sympathy, but resolve. She angled her phone, braced it against her water glass. The screen lit her face blue. A swipe, another tap, and she set it down like nothing at all. When I passed behind her with the cranberry sauce, I caught a glimpse of the screen. Daniel's face, framed by his study, watching, silent, hawk-eyed. I didn't say a word. I kept walking, feeling the kitchen's warmth fade to the dining room's chill. Dinner had gone smoothly enough if you ignored the little jabs Brandon kept slipping in. I tuned him out and focused on gravy levels, sweet potatoes staying hot, rolls making it around again. When everyone finally sat, plates were full, glasses topped off, and for a moment there was that warm hum I always hoped for. I let myself breathe. Then Brandon decided it was time for a show. He set his fork down with a clink and leaned back like he'd wrapped a long, important day. You know, Mom, he said loud enough to cut through every side conversation. I was telling the guys at work about you. The chatter fell off. I kept slicing my turkey. He kept on, said I had this incredible skill for filling my days without getting much done. Really something, if you think about it. You've made a life out of staying busy without achieving anything. My shoulders tightened. Sarah gave her wine glass a small, awkward smile. A cousin or two snickered under their breath. Brandon wasn't done. You're great at this, he said, waving his glass at the table. But let's be honest, you never built a career. Never took a risk. Dad's checks kept you after the divorce, and you just coasted. Some folks build things. You kept the lights on. The words hit like stones. My knife pressed too hard and scraped the plate. Somewhere down the table someone cleared a throat. Another cousin shifted, but nobody spoke. Brandon leaned in, elbows on the table, finishing his performance. Don't you wish you'd done something real, something to be proud of beyond this? I opened my mouth, but Lily's voice cut clean through. Grandpa's been on the call the whole time, she said, level as a weather report. Brandon froze. What? She tipped the phone just enough to show Daniel on screen, sitting in his study, eyes locked on the camera. I've had him on video since before dinner, Lily said. He heard every word you said to Grandma. For a second Brandon looked amused. You're kidding. She didn't blink. I'm not. Daniel's voice came through deep and steady, the kind that quiets a room without getting louder. Brandon, stay put. The smirk slipped. Dad, I'm coming over, Daniel said, cutting him off. And when I get there, we're going to talk about the way you speak to your mother. Brandon gave a thin, awkward laugh for the room more than for his father. It's teasing. Everybody knows I'm kidding, right? No one answered. I sat very still, hands folded in my lap, watching my son try to skate past a moment that was only getting heavier. For the first time in years, I felt the balance in the room shift, and not toward him. The air went strange, not loud and not quiet, just suspended, like everyone held their breath waiting to see which way this would break. Brandon cleared his throat and tried the peacemaker tone. Okay, everyone, relax, he said, looking around. It's just family ribbing. Mom knows I'm kidding. Mom, tell them. I kept my hands in my lap. I'm tired, I said. That's what I'll tell them. He frowned like he'd misheard. Come on, don't be dramatic. He looked to Lily. Turn it off. She didn't. No. Brandon's voice sharpened. This is family business. Lily, exactly, she said, meeting his eyes. That's why he's coming. Sarah tucked hair behind her ear and stared at her plate like it had become very interesting. Someone coughed. My nephew leaned toward his girlfriend and whispered, "Do you think he's really?" and got shushed. Brandon tried a softer pitch. Lily, honey, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Grandpa doesn't need to. Her phone buzzed hard enough against the glass to ruffle the water. She glanced down. He's close. Brandon's head snapped toward her. Close from where? 2 towns over, she said in that even voice. He left the second you called Grandma charity case. For a heartbeat I thought Brandon might bolt. He pushed his chair back an inch, the legs scraping the floor, then stopped. He knew what we all knew. Walking out would look worse. I stayed quiet, but my thoughts ran. All the years I had let comments slide to avoid a fight, telling myself he didn't mean it, and here was Lily refusing to let it pass. I felt something I hadn't in a long time, not just relief, but a small spark of vindication. Brandon's foot started bouncing, making the silverware tremble. Mom, he said under his breath, you don't want this. You don't want him making a scene. I looked at him for a long second. I want you to stop talking to me like I'm furniture. He blinked, and for once he didn't have a quick line ready. The porch light clicked on with the motion sensor. Footsteps on the steps outside. Slow, deliberate, heavy. A pause, then a single knock at the door. Not loud, but final. No one moved to answer. We didn't need to. He would come in. The knock had already drained the noise from the room. When the door opened without hesitation, a shiver moved around the table. Daniel stepped inside like he'd been invited, though he didn't need an invitation. Cold air clung to his wool coat, along with a sharper scent, the way a room feels right before a storm. He didn't hurry. He never has. His boots sounded solid on the floor, each step landing somewhere in Brandon's chest. He removed his gloves, slid them into his pocket, hung his coat with the same neatness he'd use for a uniform. He filled the dining room doorway as he stepped in, his posture so straight the old chair legs seemed to creak in sympathy. His eyes took in the table, the stiff smiles, the way no one reached for a fork. Evening, he said, quiet but clear. Brandon straightened, his ears already red. Dad. Daniel raised a hand, palm out. Just that. And Brandon's mouth shut like a drawer. Daniel's gaze went to Lily. You okay? She nodded, chin up. Yeah. His eyes softened for a beat when they met mine, and I remembered the man who once steadied me through a winter storm in Germany, saying nothing but keeping me on my feet. Then it was gone, replaced by steel. He turned to Brandon. You and I are going to address how you treat your mother. Brandon puffed out a breathy laugh, trying to pull the room into the bit. It's teasing. You know how families are. Daniel didn't blink. I know what respect looks like, and I know when it's missing. Down the table my sister-in-law pressed her napkin too hard. My cousin's husband cleared his throat, then thought better of speaking. Sarah stared into her wine like the answer might be floating in it. Daniel stepped closer to Brandon's chair, his shadow falling over the plate. 16 years old, he said, nodding toward Lily, and she knows better. She stood up tonight when no one else did. Brandon glanced at Lily for help. She didn't look away. I should have done this years ago, Daniel said, voice even but edged. Should have been here to see it firsthand. I'm here now. Brandon rubbed the back of his neck. Dad, this isn't the time. This, Daniel said, cutting him off, is exactly the time. You humiliate your mother in her own home and call it dinner talk. That ends tonight. Silence sat thick. Somewhere the furnace clicked on and filled the room with a low hum until Daniel spoke again. You're going to apologize. Not later, not quietly, right now. And you're going to mean it. Brandon's lips parted, but Daniel leaned in just enough for his voice to drop lower, sharper. When we finish here, he said, we will have a separate conversation about what changes from this moment on. Because from where I stand you've been living comfortably on a family you don't respect. Holidays hosted under your name but run by your mother. Favors asked without gratitude. Money you didn't earn. That stops tonight. You could see the words land. Brandon's jaw worked but no sound came. He looked for a friendly face and found only eyes watching. Daniel straightened, folded his hands behind his back, and waited. He let the quiet stretch. You want me to start, Daniel said evenly, or do you want to try an apology first? Brandon shifted. Dad, you're blowing this out of. I'll start, Daniel said, cleanly slicing off the sentence. 10 years ago your mother drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to bring dinner when Sarah was in the hospital. Remember? Brandon blinked. Yeah, but... Remember what you told her when she arrived. You said she could have just sent money. That was the thanks she got for freezing her hands hauling those trays in. Across the table, a cousin shook her head. Daniel didn't wait. 5 years ago she offered to watch your kids so you and Sarah could take a weekend in Maine. Remember. Yes. When you came back, instead of thanking her, you complained they stayed up late. Not that she gave up her weekend. Not that she cooked and read and kept them happy. You criticized. Sarah flushed and looked down. Daniel took one slow step. 3 years ago, Christmas, she gave you tools you'd been talking about for months, and you said, he glanced at Lily. Go on, tell me if I've got it wrong. What am I supposed to do with this? I don't have time for projects. Lily nodded once. That's exactly what he said. Brandon looked at her, his jaw tight. I was joking. Daniel lifted a hand. You hide a lot of disrespect behind that word. He let the refrigerator hum fill another beat. 2 years ago, he said quietly, she came to your birthday with a cake from scratch though her arthritis was so bad she could barely hold the spoon. You took one bite and said too sweet. Then you got a beer and left her sitting there. That memory settled like weight. I saw it in Sarah's eyes, and in the way my brother-in-law studied his napkin. Last month, Daniel went on, You asked her for $20,000 to expand your business. She hesitated, and you told her if she wouldn't help. Don't act proud of me. That one made Brandon lower his head. Daniel's shadow stretched across his plate. Tonight you humiliate her again in front of her family, and think this is just another meal. No, this is the last one like this. Brandon finally spoke. All right, Fine. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, Mom. Daniel didn't move. That's not an apology. That's a reflex. Try again. Brandon glanced at me. Mom, I'm. Look at her, Daniel said, his tone dropping a degree colder. Say what you're sorry for, exactly, so everyone here knows you understand it. The pause stretched until I could feel my heartbeat. Brandon swallowed. I'm sorry for how I spoke to you tonight and before. I'm sorry I made it seem like what you do doesn't matter. Daniel waited, letting the quiet push him forward, and for not showing respect, for making you feel small. You don't deserve that. Daniel studied him, then gave one small nod. Better, he said, but an apology without change is nothing. Here's what changes. He looked around the table to make sure he had every eye. First, you do not speak to your mother like that again anywhere. If you do, I will ask you to leave whatever room you are in, and your night will be over. No second chances. Second, no more taking without thanks. The next 3 family gatherings are yours to run. Menu shopping, cooking, cleanup. Your mother is a guest. If she picks up a plate, you put it down. Third, the financial faucet is closed. No loans, no cosigns, no introductions. You want growth, earn it without her money, and without this family's shortcuts. Daniel straightened and addressed the whole room. We are not pretending we didn't hear what we heard. From now on, respect isn't presumed. It's shown, day after day, until you show it. You're a guest here, not the center of gravity. His eyes returned to Brandon. You want to be treated like a man. Start acting like one. Brandon didn't answer. He stared at his plate. Chairs creaked, forks settled on china. The room exhaled like it had held its breath for years. Lily's eyes met mine, steady and bright, and for the first time in a long while I ate without swallowing my pride along with dinner. When the plates were cleared, no one hurried to get up, but no one wanted to break the quiet either. It felt like the meal had its own gravity, and we were pinned until someone figured out how to stand. Brandon shoved his chair back first, the scrape making Sarah wince. He muttered something about checking the kids, and left without meeting my eyes or Daniel's or Lily's. Small conversations began to bubble, careful ones. My sister-in-law asked about coffee. My cousin offered to help with dishes, but before I could answer, Daniel said she's not lifting a finger tonight. That settled it. I stayed seated, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of tea. People drifted past to touch my shoulder, or murmur a soft "good for you" or "about time." A few just met my eyes and nodded like the words weren't necessary. Lily stood behind me, leaning on my chair. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," she whispered. "You didn't even have to raise your voice." I smiled, warmth spreading that had nothing to do with tea. "I didn't have to. I had you." Her cheeks pinked, but she didn't look away. "He'll think twice next time." "He will," I said. For the first time in years, I believed it. When most guests had gone, the house settled into that soft, muffled quiet that only comes after a long evening. Daniel found me in the kitchen, standing near the sink with his hands in his pockets. "You should have called me sooner," he said. "I didn't think it would matter," I told him. He's been like this for years. It matters, he said. It always matters. We stood there for a moment, the silence easy in a way I didn't expect. Time had changed us. Still, I saw the man I had built a life with, the one who carried our boy on his shoulders, the one who fixed the porch steps in the rain without being asked. You were good tonight, I said. He shrugged. I wasn't here when it started. The least I could do was be here when it stopped. We didn't hug or linger, but as he left he gave Lily a small salute. She grinned all the way to the door. The next Sunday at a smaller lunch, Brandon was quiet, not sulking, not combative, just quiet. He served others before himself. He asked if I wanted more tea. It wasn't a full change, not yet, but it was a shift you notice when someone is testing new ground. Word traveled. Family who weren't there heard. Neighbors seemed to know. At the grocery store, a woman gave me a knowing smile. Not pity, respect. Brandon felt it, too. He could sense the difference in how people looked at him, not with admiration, but with the memory of what they'd heard. He'd lost something you can't buy back, and we both knew it. That evening I settled into my chair with a blanket and a book. Lily curled on the couch across from me. Think Grandpa will have to come back again, she asked. I shook my head. No, once was enough. She smiled and went back to her phone. I thought about the years of quiet tolerance and swallowed words, the dinners where my own son made me feel like a guest in my house. That night shifted something, not only in him but in me. Brandon is still my son, but he doesn't run the room anymore. And that's enough. So that's my story. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think Brandon will truly change? Or is he just behaving because he's afraid of his father? Tell me in the comments and subscribe if you want more stories like mine.